good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight with the third part of our series on the people you'll meet, what is a. And so I thank you for coming to join us tonight. In review, in the last two nights, we had what is a parent mentor and how do they work closely with an SSA. Last week, it was what is a transition coordinator and how they work closely with an SSA. And tonight we will have Nicholas Smith, who is a supervisor of service coordinators, which is the other name of an SSA. And he'll be able to tell you why we're called something different for the same job. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And this is the part that gets edited.
Oh.
Okay, you see?
Well, there we go.
All right, from the beginning. Okay. So like I said, this is about what is a service support administrator, SSA, or in Franklin County, Ohio, the title is service coordination. Our presenter is Nicholas Smith, who is the service coordinator supervisor for Franklin County Board of Developmental Disabilities. We are hosting this along with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities and its grant called the Ohio Family Network, as well as Charting the Life Course. And I am Deb Peterman. I am with the Center for Disability Empowerment. I am a transition coordinator and community connector, and I also am an Ohio ambassador for Charting the Life Course. The Center for Disability Empowerment is a 501c3 non-residential independent living center driven by independent living that is driven by choice and direction of people with disabilities. We serve all people, all ages, all disabilities. Our core services that are federally mandated for us are to provide information and referral, independent living and living skills, training and community connections, empower youth, which is transition for youth ages 14 through 24. We have an employment specialist and community living healthcare outreach. So last night, and actually the first week, we also talked about a Charting the Life Course tool called a trajectory. So this slide is just an example of what can be used when, as I circle this, when we decide what is the vision for a good life. And we have the person, what does that person need to do or plan towards that good life? And these tools are terrific. There are three basic tools that we commonly use called the person-centered profile, the trajectory, and the integrated star. So I'm going to introduce you to Nick and let you take it from there.
All right. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Nicholas Smith. I am a service coordination supervisor in Franklin County. And we're going to go through today a few different objectives as we talk about what is a service coordinator. Again, we're going to talk briefly about the history behind the development of the home and community-based waiver and the creation of county boards of DD in Ohio specifically to oversee these waivers. And the reason why I say in Ohio specifically is other states have left that up at the state level, whereas the state of Ohio decided to disperse that responsibility to county boards. Second objective, understand what a service coordinator is and the role they play in the individuals' lives that we serve. Understand how you can become connected with service coordination if you or your loved one is interested in becoming involved with your local county board of DD. Understand how caseloads are designed and what service coordination looks like specifically at Franklin County Board of DD, and understand how you can become part of the service coordination team at Franklin County Board of DD if that is something that interests you as well. Luckily for you guys, Deb reached out to me. I am also the person who is the onboarding and hiring person for our department for the service coordination position. So that's excellent as well. Okay, so the history behind service coordination. So the HCBS waiver program, HCBS stands for Home and Community-Based Services, was established by Section 2176 of the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1981. It was incorporated into the Social Security Act, Section 1915C. So under this program, states can elect to furnish under Medicaid as an alternative to institutional care a broad array of services, excluding room and board, that are not otherwise covered under the Medicaid program. Passage of the statute represented a first step towards recognizing that many individuals at risk of institutionalization can be supported in their homes and communities, thereby preserving their independence and bonds to families and friends at a cost not higher than institutional care. So basically, a lot of words there, specifically acts and numbers I threw at you. What happened was during the 1970s and 1980s, obviously on kind of the back end of what people more so think of the civil rights movement, families said, listen, institutions aren't the place that we want our loved ones to go to anymore. Now, that can be for a variety of reasons. There were obviously some horror stories that were coming out of institutions and concerns over care that was happening there or not happening. And so what ends up happening is the federal government actually gets sued, and families say, listen, take the money that you were using for Medicaid and let us use that to support our loved one here in the community and here at home. And so the funds that were previously pushed towards those institutions then became available to individuals in the home. And so out of this comes the creation of the Home and Community-Based Services Waiver Program, which is overseen by Service Coordination. Okay, so that's kind of step one. So step two continued. So the adoption of these waivers by states was initially slow, but Congress has enacted a series of reforms since 1981 to make the use of these waivers less prohibited. There's this famous Supreme Court case called Olmstead versus LC, which found that unnecessary institutionalization was a violation of the civil rights established by Americans with Disability Acts passed in 1990. Olmstead allowed that states could be in compliance with the ADA if they could demonstrate they had a comprehensive working plan to move people with disabilities into less restrictive settings. You guys have probably heard of this terminology of less restrictive settings in relation to schools, right? The idea that not every individual who has a developmental disability needs to be in a special education classroom. Those who are capable of being in a less restrictive setting, and in the case of that means the general education classroom with other students, would be allowed to live there. It's the same idea here. Institutionalization is not necessary for every individual, and therefore there was more of a movement towards these home and community-based services programs. Okay. Now,
can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Would you go ahead on the slideshow, click on the enlargement?
Yes. Is that better?
There we go. Deb? Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And yes, Deb, thank you for prompting me there. I saw in the chat that you put, you'll notice that I'm putting slide numbers here at the top. I know you guys are all very capable of counting slide numbers. The reason I say that is I wanted to kind of hold questions until the end. And the reason behind that is this presentation can get a little bit choppy if we ask questions throughout. So what I'll ask you guys to do is when you have a question later on, maybe reference the slide number that you see at the top, and I can reference back to that and we can kind of directly answer the question at that point. Okay. All right. So slide number 3 here, the service coordination definition. So let's go back to what Deb said earlier, because I know this can be extremely confusing. So service coordinator is another term for what the state calls a service and support administrator, or an SSA. So before the state of Ohio came up with this terminology of service and support administrator, Franklin County, for a number of years, starting in the 1980s, had been using the term service coordinator. So when the state came up with this service and support administrator title, we in Franklin County, I should say our leadership at the time, decided we're not going to change our title to that. The folks that we work with are used to us being called service coordinators, and therefore we're going to leave it at that. So the term in this presentation is used very interchangeably. It means the same thing. Service and support administrator is the state of Ohio terminology for what we are. Service coordinators of Franklin County terminology. Okay. So a service and support administrator, though, is a person who works for a county board of DD and is assigned to you to act as the primary or main point of coordination for your services and supports. Your SSA is a troubleshooter, problem solver, and an advocate for you. So this kind of definition comes from the ARC of Ohio, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, circa 2014, a manual that was produced by DODD that was produced hand in hand with the ARC of Ohio, I should say. And the reason I'm sticking to this more baseline definition is because, and I have linked underneath there in the third bullet point, what the actual SSA rule says. If I were to try and put that onto a slide, that would be about 10 slides in and of itself. So if you actually follow that link here in the red, it will take you to the DODD website, and it defines the specific responsibilities and expectations of an SSA. I'm going to stay with this more basic, simplified version of it, and I'm going to go into specific examples of these responsibilities and expectations, as opposed to reading a lot of legal jargon that, let's just be honest, it's very gray. It's not as easy to understand. Okay, so there are 88 counties in Ohio. All of them have a board of developmental disabilities, although some of our smaller counties have combined their boards due to funding. So that is to say, you may see, especially in eastern and southern Ohio, where the population size is a little bit smaller, some of these county boards don't stand alone. They've connected with a few of the ones around them. However, Franklin County, obviously being the largest of the county boards here in Ohio, we do things on our own. Okay. So what role does an SSA play? So this is kind of going back to that expectations and responsibilities. There's a lot of different roles. If you look up in the right-hand corner here, I have Russian nesting dolls. And the reason I put that in there is I think that's the best way to think of what an SSA is, because an SSA does so many different things. A lot of the terminology that people use at my work is they'll say we wear so many different hats. But I like the idea of a Russian nesting doll, because when you think you understand what the definition of a service coordinator is, then you take the top off and oh, there's more inside, and you keep going and going all the way to the smallest Russian nesting doll. So in this case, let's actually talk about some of those different roles. So the first is advocacy. We as service coordinators act as an advocate on behalf of the individual and their health and safety. Now, I know many of you, either if you are an individual, you have loved ones who support you. If you are a family member, you obviously are here because you support your loved one. Unfortunately, there are individuals we serve who don't have any sort of natural supports or family supports in their life. And so advocacy is a big part of what we have to do to make sure that individual is living life to the fullest and that their health and safety is prioritized. Second role that I have listed here is linkage. We work to connect individuals with services providers and resources, which are sometimes out of the county board's scope, to meet the needs and wants of the individuals that we serve. Okay. Deb and CDE are a great example. Some of the roles that they can play for you, maybe things that fall outside of the jurisdiction of the county board. And so I may refer people to her agency in order to be able to, meet some of these needs. The third role that I have listed there is oversight. So we are tasked with the oversight to ensure that services are being delivered in the most effective and cost-efficient manner, allowing the individual to best utilize their funding. Recognizing that there are individuals with funding caps, we want to make sure that that money is going the furthest possible for them and meeting their needs. Oversight also includes, though, if we see things that aren't supposed to be happening, we are required mandated reporters as well. Okay. Mediation. We are in the role of acting as a mediator in disputes between providers and individuals and families. Obviously, this occurs. There's conflict in every form of life, and that is no different here with service coordination. We are supposed to be the non-biased third party who's able to step in and mediate these disputes. And if it's something that ends up not being able to be mediated, then we may say maybe we need to look to a different provider or service to meet the needs. We also play the role of guidance. We want to ensure that individuals understand the services available to them and how best to utilize these services to meet their wants and needs. A little bit of my background: I was an educator before I became a service coordinator. I taught at the high school level. And I came into this field in 2014. So I've been in this field for 9 years at this point. And I will tell you that the waiver has changed extensively just in the 9 years I've been here. There are about 8 or 9 different services that are now available through the waivers that did not exist just over a decade ago. And so what we have to do is we need to make sure that we're helping the individuals and families understand these different services as they become available, and maybe how they can best be utilized to meet the wants and needs of the individual. Okay. So again, you kind of see what I'm saying here about all these different roles we play. We really do remind me of a Russian nesting doll. It's hard to accurately identify what a service coordinator is because of the breadth and the scope of the different roles that we play. Okay. So if I can get it. All right, so some of you may not be connected with a service coordinator or a county board of DD. So you may be thinking, well, how do I get connected? How do I get started? So each county board, wherever you live, is responsible for determining the eligibility of an individual applying through what is called the intake process. So step 1 would be to look up the phone number of your local county board of DD's intake department. You would want to contact them. I should say most counties have an application you can complete online. Some of our smaller counties, I think, are still moving towards that. So I would say start with a phone call, ask how you can get set up. You may be able to complete the application online or set up a time to meet with the intake department personnel. And then step 3, there will be documentation that is needed that will be explained to you. This is likely to take the form of a medical or psychiatric documentation, depending on the diagnosis, showing that the disability took place prior to the age of 22. So what you have to remember when we talk about a developmental disability as defined under federal law means that that disability took place prior to the age of 22, okay? And so, unfortunately, if you have a loved one who had a traumatic brain injury that occurred at 22 years and 1 day, they would not be eligible for County Board of DD services. But if you had someone where an accident took place before, if they were born with something such as Down syndrome, intellectual disabilities, cerebral palsy, etc., and you can prove that it happened before the age of 22, then we will likely ask you for that documentation, okay? Again, I say it's medical or psychiatric because depending on the diagnosis, it was either a physician or a psychiatrist. So whichever one qualifies you, let's stick with the idea of an intellectual disability, we would need something from a psychiatrist that shows that the individual is intellectually disabled, okay? Again, Deb has sent this out to you. I have included the link. If you live in Franklin County Board of DD and you follow that link, it will take you directly to how to apply for services with Franklin County specifically. If you're someone watching this who lives outside of Franklin County, again, get in contact with your local county board of DD and ask to speak with their intake department as to how to go about the process. Okay. How are caseloads designed? So a lot of people say, okay, once I've gone through the intake process, now I'm going to get a service coordinator. How does that happen? Okay. So this decision really is made by each county board of developmental disabilities. Remember what I said before, that the state entrusts our county boards to manage the waivers that we work alongside. So the decision is made by each county board of DD. I'm going to speak specifically to Franklin County, but also these are kind of the common methods as to how caseloads may be assigned to SSAs. So first and foremost, the age of the individual being served is often a way that we designate caseloads. So in Franklin County, we will start working with individuals as young as age 3, all the way through their entire life, as long as they live. Before age 3, there's a program called Help Me Grow that is run at the state level that you can sign up for your loved one. But after that, they become eligible for our services. How we split it is we have what's called our FACES team, which is Family and Children Extra Supports. That is individuals ages 3 through when they leave school. So that could be up to the age of 22 under federal law, could be as young as age 18, depending on the individual. But we're going to be with them from 3 through the end of school. They will have a FACES service coordinator. Once they exit school, whatever age that is, they will enter what we call an adult caseload. Okay. So that is the way that we split it in Franklin County. A further way that we split it, though, is what waiver type does the individual have? Okay. In the state of Ohio, there are 3 waiver types that your loved one can be on. The first is a self waiver. The second is a level 1 waiver. And the third is an individual options waiver. So what we do is we split it by age, but then we also split it by what waiver type does your loved one have. There are a few exceptions to this. Some county boards have more specialized types of caseloads, like working with transition age youth or youth who are involved with multiple systems. Maybe that means that they're working with the mental health board as well as the DD support system. So they usually call those individuals multi-system youth. So we in Franklin County don't quite have that kind of specialized type of caseload. But some other counties I am aware of do something like that. Again, it's up to your local county board of DD how they split the caseloads. You will notice that should you or your loved one begin services with county boards at a young age, you will most likely see a transitioning coordinator as you age. Okay. Obviously, people leave positions. As I explained to you before, if you age from our FACES team to our adult team, you're obviously going to have someone change, whether or not your service coordinator has left the county board. You will move to an adult coordinator. But that's just kind of how it goes. Okay. So, service coordination at FCBDD, we are the largest county board of developmental disabilities in the state of Ohio amongst the 88 counties. We work alongside roughly 10,000 individuals, with the majority being served on one of the waiver types I talked about before, with the self, the level 1, or the IO. We do, however, serve some people who are not on waivers, and these individuals we classify as traditional, meaning that they have no funding through Medicaid to support them, or they may be county-funded therapies. So these are therapy services only. When I talk about therapies, think OT, think PT, think speech, counseling, all that type of stuff. Okay. The Franklin County Board of DD funds those therapies directly through county dollars. Okay. There are about 250 SSAs and supervisors in Franklin County because we are serving up to 10,000 folks at any moment in time. Okay. We do have 2 outlying departments within service coordination. They're called our intake department, which we referenced earlier. Those are the folks on the front end who determine whether your loved one or you are eligible for services. And we also have what we call our MUI department, which stands for our Major Unusual Incident Department. These are investigative agents who are involved in oversight, kind of one of the roles that I talked about earlier, who will investigate concerns and considerations where the SSA feels that something may be out of character, out of whack, however you want to phrase it. Okay. And then finally, Deb asked me to talk about, for anyone who might be interested, how can I become an SSA? And as I said earlier, and I know some of you may not have joined right at the start, the great thing for you is Deb didn't even realize that she asked the person who's in charge of hiring new SSAs at Franklin County Board of DD to do this presentation. So I can tell you firsthand what that looks like. There are specific requirements for who can become a service coordinator. And those have been left to the County Board of DD to decide, but there are a few exceptions. All applicants must complete a federal background check and drug test. Remember, all of our County Board of DDs makes you a government worker. Therefore, you are subject to background checks and drug tests. Any applicant on what's called the abuser registry, which is maintained by DODD, would not be eligible for employment. So we have folks who have become involved in the developmental disability community, whether that's as a direct support professional or some other professional within the field, who have essentially committed crimes against individuals with developmental disabilities, who will be placed on the abuser registry and be considered a lifetime ban to work with that community moving forward. So if the applicant is on the abuser registry, they would be flagged and they would not be eligible for employment as an SSA. Now, speaking specifically to what we look for here at Franklin County Board of DD, if you are interested in becoming a service coordinator, you must have at least a bachelor's degree from an accredited university or college. You must have a driver's abstract showing a good recent driving history. So if you're not familiar with the driver's abstract, it usually looks back about 3 years. And we need to see, basically what happens is Franklin County Board of DD will take out insurance on all of our folks who work with us as SSAs because you're driving day in and day out for your job. So we need to make sure we can insure you in case, heaven forbid, there would be some sort of accident that you have. So we want to see people with a good recent driving history. We would need to have 2 letters of professional reference, and one of those must come from a supervisor or superior, manager, whatever the terminology is in your field, but someone who has supervised you. And then finally, again, I made this a link in what was sent to you guys, and you can follow this. You must complete an application online at our website under the employment opportunities, and you would choose the service coordinator role. So that is how you can become an SSA as well. Okay. So, Deb, I think looks like you threw a link in there for enrollment related to Franklin County. All right, so I'm looking at the questions here. So Deb says on Facebook Live, Zoe asked, what is a benefits analysis? Okay, so great question, Zoe. So a benefits analysis, basically what that is, it is a packet that will be created for your loved one. And what it does is it will tell you what sort of benefits your loved one is eligible for. And most of the time when people seek out a benefits analysis, it basically tells you if you start to work so many hours per week, this is how it will affect your benefits. So the different benefits that really kind of hones in on when it's talking about that is your Social Security and your Medicaid eligibility. Okay, because obviously a lot of people get concerned, if I start working too much, is that going to affect my benefits? The answer is it's complicated, is what I would say. It depends if the individual receives Social Security disability income, SSDI versus SSI. There are more protections for folks who receive SSDI than there are for SSI in terms of having that garnished if you start to work. Again, this is something though, the benefits analysis is completed by people who actually take a course through the state of Ohio to be certified in completing this service. It can be paid for through any of the waivers I mentioned before, the self waiver, the level 1 waiver, or the individual options waiver. There's also a service for any of you who may not be familiar at the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, which is BVR, which is at the state level. There's a program called Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. This is a program that focuses specifically on getting our folks employed. If you or your loved one qualifies for services through them and shows that you would like to pursue competitive community employment, they have someone on staff who can complete a benefits analysis at the cost of OOD, that program, as opposed to your loved one's waiver. So you can pursue a benefits analysis through that as well. Hopefully that answers your questions. All right. So I know Deb is on Facebook Live. I am not, so I can't necessarily see.
So I have some questions. First of all, I think working with families, the jargon used is so, I think it impairs a lot of us from really knowing the right questions or what does that mean? You know what I mean? I find sometimes, I know that we understand no, I'm not going to include myself in that. There's a lot of terms that professionals use, and I get concerned sometimes when it let's say if I asked you to send me a pamphlet and it has all that information, I still have trouble deciphering. Is that a common problem?
Absolutely. We kind of refer to it as the alphabet soup, right? Because we work in government, we love acronyms for whatever reason. And I think the problem is, and I'm guilty of it too, probably when I was talking, I use acronyms because it's secondhand language to me, essentially, at this point in time. It's very confusing. It can be very intimidating. And what I would encourage all of you to do, if you're running into situations like that, reach out to your local county boards of DD and ask for support in understanding different literature that you're reading online. DODD also has supports, which is at the state level, the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities, or DODD. You should contact them as well if you're confused about it. It's very intimidating. If you haven't been involved in the field, I remember when I first started, it felt extremely overwhelming. I'm 9 years in now, so it's almost like a second language to me. But I certainly understand that feeling, Deb, of what you're saying.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better way to tell you guys. We have talked about here in Franklin County trying to create almost like an acronym cheat sheet, I guess you would call it, for our folks. So when they see these different acronyms, they can kind of tell them, oh, that's what this means. But it hasn't come to fruition at this point that I'm aware of, unfortunately.
Well, actually, I have something from the Ohio Developmental Disabilities Council called Alphabet Soup.
There you go.
And I don't know where I got it, but it's very, very helpful. That is with the Ohio Developmental Disabilities Council on East Broad Street. Perhaps if you call them, they would offer that.
Yeah, and that could potentially, I'm assuming, honestly, maybe if anyone looking has, searches that online, Alphabet Soup, who'd you say it was through?
It was through Ohio Developmental Disabilities Council.
Okay.
And maybe as you're answering a question, I'll go ahead and find that email contact information. Okay. Yeah. So are there any questions? Because I still have some more.
Yeah, one second here, Deb. I know Donald asked in the chat. He said, has an individual been hired without a bachelor's degree? So Donald, I can't speak to every county board of developmental disabilities, but our human resources department here in Franklin County will not entertain the idea of hiring someone without a bachelor's degree for the service coordination position. I do believe we have some other employment opportunities through our county board that does not require a bachelor's degree, but I'm only familiar with the service coordination side of things. So,
Does that answer your question, Donald?
looks like Donald put a thumbs up, so I think
okay.
I think he's good. Thanks, Donald.
Okay. All right. How many people could be on an SSA caseload?
That's a great
What's
question.
typical?
Yeah, so here in Franklin County, if the individual has a waiver, we cap our waiver caseloads between 35 and 38 individuals for every service coordinator. If they are what I refer to as a traditional case, which means they don't have funding available to them, they don't have a waiver, that can range from 50 to 54 individuals per service coordinator.
Okay. How do we help a person who needs adult services but has not been connected to Franklin County Board DD ever? And I'm going to add on top of that, there are some families that do not want a diagnosis on their child's history. So if they're not in the system, what happens next?
Well, to be honest with you, there's not a great solution for that, unfortunately. The different day programs and services through adult day services that we work with will accept private funding. I know obviously that may be cost prohibitive, unfortunately, to some families to be able to afford that. The best way truly is to seek services through us. But again, I don't want to pressure anyone who may not feel comfortable with that.
Okay, so last week we talked about what is a transition coordinator who works with an SSA, and you mentioned in slide 6 that there are children who need extra support. How does that work?
Yeah, so mostly when it comes, Franklin County doesn't have a great, I would say, unfortunately, we don't have the greatest system for that. So typically what happens in Franklin County, every school district here within Franklin County has what's called a transition coordinator. And so what I encourage people as your loved one is getting close to graduating high school and moving forward is to have a conversation with them kind of about what is next. What are you going to do post high school, post graduation? Something we do offer, though, if you are someone in Franklin County, we offer a program called What's Next. That's the name of the program. It is run by one of our supervisors, Ann Russell, and it is for families and individuals who are getting ready to take that next step post-graduation. And we talk about what is available to them. So it is I believe it's about 5 weeks. And they kind of go through all kinds of different things related to employment, related to adult services. They also talk about housing, because as we know, sometimes our loved ones want to take the next step that they see all of us taking. When you turn 18, they think, oh, it's time to go off, move out and move into the real world outside of the family home. So they do discussions surrounding that as well. But the other thing I would encourage you to do is talk to your service coordinator. That's the best thing you can do. Talk to them and start. Do not wait till the senior year. Do not wait till second semester senior year. More importantly, start early and ask those questions. The Franklin County is blessed with a extraordinary number of different day services and programs, including employment programs. Start the conversation early, get involved as soon as you can. We even have transition to work programs in Franklin County. So if your loved one is someone who's thinking, maybe I want to work, but I'm not really sure about that at this point in time, we do offer kind of summer camps called transition to work that would give them kind of an idea, a taste of what community employment looks like to see if that's something that maybe adult services in terms of the more traditional setting isn't right for them. And they think, well, let's see what this looks like before I make a decision. So I would encourage them to look into that too.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You mentioned in slide 7, a conditional, meaning if a person doesn't have funding, is there a way that we can help them get connected to Medicaid and to Social Security?
Yeah, so basically what happens is almost everyone is going to be what we consider traditional at some point in their life when they sign up for services, unless there's someone who signs up later in life. So typically what happens, I'm just going to walk you through as if you're starting from age 3 when you would first come to us forward. What a lot of people are immediately put onto is what's called a FACES traditional caseload. And again, FACES stands for Family and Children Extra Support. It's really just our kids team. Think of it that way, ages 3 to 22 or 3 through 18 whenever they graduate. So traditional, really, maybe you haven't been, basically what happens is when you're traditional folks, we do what's called a waitlist assessment. And what the waitlist assessment is we determine what sort of needs you or your loved one has. And then we prioritize the individual based on the needs that we find through that assessment. The more needs you have, the higher you are prioritized on the list, okay? And so what happens is with this waitlist assessment, we create a list of folks, and we are going to prioritize the folks at the top to get waivers before others, and we work our way down the list, okay? I also want to say, we do reevaluate people. It's not like it's a one and done. Once we do one assessment, it's all over. We are required to look at the individual once per year if they turn up as a current need. And then if they are listed as no needs, meaning we haven't identified any needs, at any point in time, you can ask to be reevaluated if you think the needs of you or your loved one has changed. Okay. So traditional, really, when I'm talking about Deb, when I'm thinking about 10,000 folks, I would say about 6,500 of our folks fall on some sort of waiver. That leaves a couple thousand who fall into either traditional or the county funded therapy section. And so again, these folks who are traditional, they may not immediately have funding, but they do usually come up over time based on needs.
Okay, would case management be something that an SSA or a service coordinator does, or is that different?
Yeah, actually, it's a term. Again, I know I've thrown a few, service and support administrator, service coordinator. People call us case managers because that's essentially what we are. Even if you're an individual who's on a traditional caseload, you do have an assigned service coordinator who will be working with you. So they're still there to help you find resources that maybe fall outside again of our jurisdiction at the county board that can help to meet any needs that come up. And so, yes, we are also, you can think of us again synonymously, we are case managers as well. We are going to stay with you 24/7, 365, as long as you keep your case open with us.
Thank you. We have done in the past webinars on siblings and sibling support. It's not uncommon for us at the Center for Disability Empowerment for siblings to, or maybe a family member from out of state will want us to help them with their person that they're concerned about. And sometimes we're not sure where to start. Where would I start? See how I can help them.
So when it comes to that, like what we would ask you to do, let's say you live in a different state and your loved one is here and you would like to get them set up for services, really is back to what I was saying, how can I get connected? Contact our intake department. Say,
Okay.
hey, my brother Nick, he lives there in Franklin County. He was diagnosed many years ago with mild ID. And, I think his needs are progressing from where they were previously, where maybe he didn't need the support you guys provided, and now he does.
Mm-hmm.
Get in contact with our intake department. We take calls from anyone. Now, of course, we're going to need your brother to cooperate and come in and do the diagnostic tests and all that kind of stuff for us. But we are definitely there to support siblings. We also, I do want to say, like, we have, this is a little bit different than siblings, but we have parents who live out of state who we serve their children. And we are still in constant contact with them about what needs are you seeing, what's being reported to you, that kind of stuff. I like to joke, being in Ohio, this is the time when all our snowbird parents go south into Florida, and we won't see them for 4 or 5 months, and they'll come back up. But we always make sure we're maintaining that contact to make sure that, you know, everything's being needed, or all the needs are being met and everything's being taken care of.
Is there a requirement when a family member contact intake? Do they have to be a power of attorney? You know, any kind of requirement?
So here's
necessary?
here's the thing where it gets a little bit tricky, because obviously there's that whole HIPAA situation, right? What I would tell you in that situation is always get your information included in the individual service plan of your loved one. So if the SSA is not familiar with you, let's say you're cold calling, we've never met you before, we have no record of who you are, that kind of stuff. Typically what you're going to do is you might get stonewalled. I'll just be honest with you, because we have to be careful in sharing private information about the folks we serve, because, you know, I know everyone on here is well-meaning, but not everyone is. Someone may contact us pretending to be a loved one of someone we serve. So we do have to take certain precautions. But if you are included, if your name and contact information is included in the individual service plan, that acts as a formal release of information where we could speak with you even if I've never met you. If I open up the ISP and you're calling me Deb, and I'm like, I don't know who this Deb person is, but I look at your sister's ISP, I see you're in there, there's my release of information, and I can be in contact with you.
Okay, so you did say a couple of things that I want to touch on. Is that okay? First of all, we at the Center for Disability Empowerment have an employment specialist, and we are not working with OOD, Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, primarily because there's lots of hoops to jump through, and some people just fall in the cracks because of the type of their disability. So we basically are saying, well, what interests you and what do you like to do, and try to work it that way rather than, you know, going through all the assessment. And sometimes people don't need that assessment for us to support them and help them. So I wanted to mention that. So we also talked about ISP. With Charting the Life course, the Ohio ISP really encourages families and I think service coordinators to consider using the Charting Life course tools. What has been your experience with that?
Yeah, you know, I obviously I'm not as well versed as you are, Deb, at being an ambassador for the Charting the Life course, but it is a very helpful tool that I know the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities really encourages our folks to utilize as well. I do think there are kind of portions from Charting the Life course that have had a major influence on the development of our new Ohio Individual Service Plan. For those of you who aren't aware, the development of service plans, they used to be, it was left up to every county board to kind of develop. They'd say, hey, it has to include this, but what the design looks like and, you know, everything that you include in there, it doesn't have to be the same. Well, what they found, of course, is as people were transitioning from county to county, there was a lot of confusion about what was necessary to transition over. You know, do we need this? Is this necessary for the plan? And so the state said, all right, we're going to throw it out. Everybody stop doing this. We're going to go to one single individual service plan. And I think it's created a lot more interconnectedness between the boards of developmental disabilities, but also between, you know, making sure that our services are consistent for the folks we serve. And I think parts of the Charting the Life course have become really integrated into that because we have much more of a focus on the individual and their strengths and what they want. Whereas previously, if you're familiar with the old individual service plan, it really focused more on deficiencies or deficits that existed for the individual and how we were going to meet them. while that's, it is important to kind of say, how are we going to help them in these areas that they need support in? There wasn't enough of a focus on the individual strengths and capabilities. And I do think this new Ohio Individual Service Plan has done a lot better job with that, certainly.
I agree. From what I know, that the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities has been a big fan of charting the life course. If you want to, I will put the lifecoursetools.com link in there. These are free pages. I'm willing to help anyone. We could do a 15-minute, Zoom, and I can help you walk through those pages. They're very simple. They are positive, and I have never met an amazing group of people who are ambassadors who are in the field. They're also family members, and they have been an amazing support for each other and for the families. So it's something I highly recommend looking into doing that. I do have one more question for you, unless let me check the Facebook. Okay, so you and I talked about this a while ago, and let me get my paper, get the right question. Sorry. The future is now. What is that about?
Yeah, so thanks for letting me get a little bit of a plug in on that, Deb. So the Future is Now is a program that was actually developed at the University of Illinois at Chicago by someone within the Disabilities Research Department there named Tamar Heller, who is a college professor there. Brilliant woman, honestly. I was so blessed to be able to kind of actually have her help teach the course to me. So Future is Now is a 5-week curriculum where we go through, it's really intended more so for older caregivers with loved ones with disabilities. And a lot of the people that we've had go through the course are parents of loved ones with disabilities. And it focuses on making sure that future planning is not left until it becomes an emergency. So a lot of the things that we talk about, we do talk about things like housing, because a lot of the folk we have seen, especially with the current generation of baby boomers, we have seen a lot of individuals who are living with their parents until their parents can truly physically no longer care for them. And then it becomes an emergency once they're not able to. And then sometimes placements don't always work out because we're rushed to figure something out. So that's kind of one of our focuses. We also talk about end of life planning kind of things. Referencing back to Zoe's question earlier about benefits analysis, that kind of stuff. We do talk about different tools related to financial planning and other things like that to make sure that your loved one is protected once you're gone, what their inheritance is protected, things like that. We actually bring in a local attorney, Derek Graham, who speaks to that. Excellent person on that. He works specifically with the disability community to create things like trusts, and he kind of walks you through all the different options that are available to parents. He's so well thought of. If you look up any DODD video about those types of things, trusts and stable accounts, etc., he's the person speaking on it. He's absolutely phenomenal. Can't speak highly enough of him. But so anyway, the Future is Now is just really focused on making sure that there's things that we often leave till the end of our life, wills, powers of attorney, financial considerations, housing, etc. We want to start that conversation early so that you guys all feel that your loved one is in a good place before it comes to that point.
Yes, we've had Derek Graham present a couple times in the past before pandemic. And he is also a family member, but his sessions are an hour long, and he has Q&A, and they have them often. So yes, they are on the DD website, but the name of their group is Resch Phillips.
Resch, Root, Phillips, and Graham, I believe.
Yeah, that's it.
I always get it messed up. There's 4 names, but you'll easily find it, I promise.
Well, I don't see, oops, let's see. All right, nope, no more questions on Facebook Live. So I think I really appreciate you taken the time to present this information. The PowerPoint can be made available through myself, D. Peterman at disabilityempowerment.net. And if you want the links on the YouTube channel, I will be editing this and I can get it to you as soon as that happens. I just need your email address. So I appreciate, Nick, everything that you do for families. As a family member myself, you know, we really care about the people who love our people. And I thank you for using your experience and your training ability and helping new people become better supporters of families.
Absolutely. And Deb, I appreciate the opportunity. I love educating people on what service coordination is, what county boards can do to help support you and your loved ones. And I actually also, I don't know if they can see it, Deb, I threw my email in the chat.
Yep.
Just, you know, if anyone would like to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to help. Again, I can't necessarily answer questions specific to other county boards, only to Franklin County. But if it's something more generalized too, you know, hey, I don't understand how this works, that kind of thing, I am certainly happy to connect with you and see what I can do to help.
I just thought of one more thing, and forgive me if you did cover this. Is the SSA or service coordinator the same position at every county, and are they required to follow the same rules, if you will?
Yeah. So again, the names are just interchangeable. They're going to be statewide. They're going to be called service and support administrators. Here in Franklin County, we use service coordinator. The roles and responsibilities are the same regardless of the county board. And now the only thing that's differentiated, I do want to say certain county boards have more funding available to them than others. To give you guys an understanding of how the funding works. So here in Franklin County, with a waiver, for every dollar that we spend in services, the federal government spends 60 cents and Franklin County spends 40 cents of that dollar. And so that's the agreed upon cost sharing model that we have. And the reason I say that is Franklin County is blessed because we have such a large tax base, very affluent tax base. We have more services available to us because of that. So what people will find sometimes in moving to some of the smaller county boards is they don't always quite have the level of funding made available to their folks that we in Franklin County have. They also don't, especially in the smaller counties, have the availability of providers and services because there's not as many people to serve as Franklin County has. And so, you know, it is a little bit different. You know, if you went from one county to another, the services that you receive are not necessarily going to be equal. But I do want to say, I have never met any service coordinator from any other county who doesn't work as hard as we do. We all are here for the same common cause of supporting the individual and their family.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you at the next event to be announced. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.